Namaskar, Marhaba, and good evening. I am Ram Madhav, a member of the Governing Council of the India Foundation. Welcome to the city of natural islands, luxury resorts, shifting sand dunes, and cool oases. Welcome to the city of Formula One races. Welcome to Abu Dhabi. Welcome to the 5th Indian Ocean Conference. Let me, at the outset, extend warmest greetings to the rulers and people of this wonderful country, the United Arab Emirates, which has celebrated its 50th National Day 2 days ago on the 2nd of December with grandeur. Indian Ocean is home to dozens of nations, diverse cultures, and disparate ecosystems. Some of them may be small, but they are all integral to its future. It is on the principle of sovereign equality that we regard each and every nation of the region as an important partner and stakeholder in peace and progress. Indian Ocean is the most happening region today. It is here that massive populations with purchasing power exist. It is here that 3 of the 5 top economies of the world are situated. It is through this ocean that 70% of the world's container trade and 50% of its energy lines pass. Sadly, it is also here that we find countless warships and submarines roaming around freely today. Simply put, Indian Ocean is the epicenter of the global power axis in the 21st century. For the world's influential and mighty, Indian Ocean, and by extension, the Indo-Pacific, is strategy. But for us, the nations in the region, it is destiny. Future of this region needs to be shaped by the active collaboration of all the stakeholder countries in the region, big and small. We, the nations of the region, must be the masters of its destiny. Indian Ocean Conference is a forum that intends to catalyze that cooperation and collaboration among the nations of the region. We started this journey in 2016 from Singapore with the support of the governments of India, Sri Lanka, and Singapore. We went to Colombo in 2017, to Hanoi in Vietnam in 2018, and to Malé in Maldives in 2020. It's a great delight that when we meet here in Abu Dhabi for the 5th conference, we are joined by a galaxy of eminences from the region and beyond. Our present chairman of the organizing committee and president of Sri Lanka, His Excellency Shri Gotabaya Rajapaksa, is here. So is the past chairman and former Prime Minister of Sri Lanka, Shri Ranil Wickremesinghe. Vice President of Maldives, Shri Faisal Naseem, and External Affairs Minister of India, who also is the co-chairman of the organizing committee, Dr. S. Jaishankar, are here. Also here are 2 other co-chairs, the Foreign Minister of Oman, Shri, Al Busaidi, and Minister Al Saye, our host from UAE. We have ministers from 9 countries present in person here and another 7 ministers joining us virtually. We have speakers and delegates from over 30 countries attending this conference. Indian Ocean Conference is not just a talking shop for intellectuals. It is a platform for policymakers who shape the future of the peoples of the region. Hence, so many ministers and officials. On behalf of the organizing committee, I take this opportunity to welcome each one of you to this prestigious conference. It is a difficult period for the entire mankind. We are all struggling to cope with the COVID pandemic. It has had its Omicron shadow over this conference also. You will find some empty seats. On behalf of all of us, I offer my prayers to all those who lost their lives to this pandemic and convey heartfelt condolences to all their near and dear ones. Friends, it was a difficult task to host this conference during such challenging times. We tried our best. I seek your forbearance for any shortcomings on our part. Welcome you all once again to this prestigious forum of the world's most happening region. Thank you and namaskar.
Namaskar, good evening, and a very warm welcome to the 5th Indian Ocean Conference at Abu Dhabi. We are happy to have amongst us His Excellency Gotabaya Rajapaksa, the Honorable President of Sri Lanka, and also the Chair of the Organizing Committee of the conference. His Excellency Faisal Naseem, the Honorable Vice President of Maldives. His Excellency Rear Admiral Josaia Voreqe Bainimarama, the Honorable Prime Minister of Fiji, who will be addressing us virtually. His Excellency S. Jaishankar, the Honorable External Affairs Minister of India and the Vice Chair of the Organizing Committee of the conference. His Excellency Sayyid Badr bin Hamad bin Hamood Al Busaidi, the Honorable Foreign Minister of Oman and Vice Chair of the Organizing Committee of the conference. And His Excellency Ahmed Ali Al Sai, the Honorable Minister of State of the United Arab Emirates and Vice Chair of the Organizing Committee of the conference. I would request our esteemed guests to please join us on stage.
Namaskar. Good evening. My name is Shri. I am one of the board members of the India Foundation. May I now request His Excellency Ahmed Ali Al Saya, Minister of State, UAE, to please come to the podium and give us his welcome address.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pleasure that I wish you all a very warm welcome to the United Arab Emirates. We are very honored and privileged to have been chosen as the host of the Indian Ocean Conference this year. Let me take this opportunity to express my sincere thanks and appreciation to the India Foundation for organizing this fifth session of the Indian Ocean Conference. I would like to commend your efforts in organizing this event despite the current circumstances brought about by COVID-19. I find myself reflecting on the topics under discussion 2 years ago when we focused on traditional and non-traditional challenges. I think it was very appropriate that a number of my counterparts identified shifting global dynamics and the fraying of the existing international order as potential threats to regional and global stability. Over the last couple of years, we have seen this play out. It is therefore very appropriate that the theme for this year's conference explores three intertwined and topical issues: ecology and environment in the Indian Ocean region, the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, and the post-pandemic economic recovery and growth. Regional coordination and alignment will be required to address many critical challenges across these issues. For all of us in the Indian Ocean Rim region, the effects of climate change is and will be significant. The UAE draws parallels and links between climate change and other emerging issues relevant to the region, such as mass migration, environmental degradation, food security, and extreme weather change. As the host of COP28 in 2023, the UAE appreciates the heavy responsibility that it will shoulder in steering an ambitious climate change and sustainability agenda. We will continue to engage heavily with our regional partners and all of you here in the room to drive this critical conversation and identify areas where which we need to prioritize. On health, there are wide variations on how each country is currently handling the COVID-19 crisis. As a proactive actor in handling and responding to COVID-19, the UAE looks forward to further unifying regional efforts and working with our partners to tackle the socio-economic impacts of COVID-19 and preparing for future pandemics. Here in the UAE, widespread access to vaccines and efficient vaccination efforts have allowed the UAE to restart its economy in a short time span, open its borders, and host Expo 2020 Dubai. We recognize that many other countries are not as lucky as the UAE, and the UAE will continue to support global and regional efforts to ensure that vaccines are accessible to developing partners and all communities. This year marks the Uae Golden Jubilee. And on 2nd December 2021, the nation celebrated 50 years since its historic unification. We are pleased that you chose to visit the UAE during this period to join us in celebrating this historic moment. Where we go from here will very much depend on whether we can work together to solve the challenges that we collectively face. The UAE and countries of the Indian Ocean region have been bound together by strong and long-standing ties, ranging from trade, tourism, investments to culture. Ultimately, we recognize that mutual prosperity depends heavily on the strength of these ties. In closing, I am confident that our countries will continue to promote deeper partnerships between one another, collaborate together in overcoming the challenges faced by us today. In this regard, I again welcome all of you to this conference and hope that you have a delightful stay throughout your visit. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. May I now request for the inaugural address, His Excellency Gotabaya Rajapaksa, President of Sri Lanka, to please come to the podium and give us his views. Thank you.
Your Excellencies, distinguished invitees, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to welcome all of you to the 5th Indian Ocean Conference. At the outset, I take this opportunity to thank the India Foundation, this Rajaratnam School of International Studies of Nanyang Technological University, Singapore, and the Institute of National Security Studies of Sri Lanka, together with the organizing committee for their efforts for this event. The Indian Ocean Conference provides an invaluable opportunity for countries in the region as well as our partners to deliberate on the critical issues affecting us. The theme of this year's conference centers on 3 topics: ecology, economy, epidemic, that deserves our utmost attention and deepest consideration. As we meet here today, the most immediate and significant of these is the continuing impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the world at large. When the COVID-19 virus started spreading around the world in the first quarter of 2020, it posed serious challenge to all nations. For perhaps the first time in history, humanity had the sophistication and the resources to actively identify, inhibit, and even try and prevent the widespread devastation of a global epidemic before it was too late. Urgent actions to save lives were taken by nearly all countries. These included border closures, lockdowns, and testing, as well as isolating and treating those infected, while rapidly tracing their contacts and quarantining them before the virus spreads to the wider population. The able leadership provided by the World Health Organization during this time was vital in coordinating a global response to this new threat. The cooperation between nations in the early stages of the pandemic, including sharing data and technical expertise, supporting capacity building in healthcare systems, and financial assistance was truly laudable. Together with the selfless service rendered by healthcare personnel, scientists, and essential workers around the world, this international cooperation helped humanity through this pandemic. Sri Lanka took action to curb the spread of the virus very early on. A national task force involving all key stakeholders within and outside government was set up to oversee our pandemic response. After closing borders in late March last year, Sri Lanka imposed full national lockdown for several weeks to contain the spread of the virus before reopening after bringing transmission down to near zero. Other state organs outside the health ministry played a significant role in supporting the healthcare system at this time. The military rapidly constructed new quarantine centers and treatment facilities, managed our quarantine program, and together with the police helped public health officials with contact tracing. This freed healthcare personnel to focus on the medical aspect of our pandemic response. The government also supported citizens affected by the lockdown, including grants of cash and dry rations to daily wage earners and those of social welfare schemes. Even after Sri Lanka reopened after the first lockdown, strict public health measures, including mask wearing and social distancing, remained in place. Regional as well as countrywide lockdowns were reimposed whenever new waves of infection spread in the country. Sri Lanka's last lockdown ended in October 2021, after which the country has slowly returned to normalcy. This was enabled by the outstanding success of our vaccination program. We have now vaccinated 85% of all over the age of 16 with 2 doses of a COVID-19 vaccine, with 98% having received at least 1 dose. This rapid rollout of vaccines was facilitated by the military, which set up and operated vaccination centers, including mobile services throughout the country to help protect our public in record time. We greatly appreciate the generosity of India, China, the United States of America, and Japan, all of whom donated vaccines to us either directly or through COVAX, which augmented the larger quantity Sri Lanka purchased from manufacturers on commercial terms. At the same time, it is a matter of concern that the relatively slow rollout of vaccines in some parts of the world has resulted in the emergence of a potentially devastating new variants of the virus that needs to be carefully monitored in the days and weeks to come. If existing vaccines are in fact less effective against this new Omicron variant, the world may soon return to square one with border closures and other restrictions, including lockdowns imposed once again with potentially catastrophic consequences. I therefore call upon nations that have the wherewithal to do so, to support the vaccination drives of less wealthy countries more effectively. The COVID-19 pandemic will not end until everyone, everywhere is inoculated against the virus. This can only be achieved through far-reaching cooperation between nations and particularly through the support provided by richer nations to developing countries. Such cooperation will also be necessary to support the global economic recovery following the pandemic. The measures taken worldwide to combat the pandemic, although they proved invaluable in saving countless lives, came at a steep cost. The rapid decline in economic activity these measures caused have had serious long-term consequences on global travel, trade, and economic growth. Developing countries in particular have been very badly impacted. The loss of revenue from tourism, the loss of foreign exchange remittances from expatriate workers, and the loss of export earnings have been especially devastating. When combined with the high public expenditure necessary for healthcare and social welfare programs, as well as the fiscal and monetary policies needed to support economic revival, many developing nations, including Sri Lanka, now find themselves in a very difficult situation. Countries that had taken on significant external debt to fund their development programs are particularly badly affected, with very little reserves available to meet debt repayment obligations. Sadly, in contrast to the leadership provided by the WHO for the global pandemic response, no world institution has stepped forward to help countries navigate their economic recovery. Intergovernmental groups, regional blocs, multilateral organizations, and individual countries that could have assumed such a role on behalf of the global economy have not done so. This is unfortunate. Although the pandemic has affected rich and poor countries alike, a disproportionate impact is borne by poorer countries. Absorbing or compensating for the loss of revenue from tourism as well as the loss of foreign remittances from expatriate workers overseas due to the economic consequences of the pandemic is not easy for smaller economies. It is especially hard for economies that are already burdened with external debt obligations. It would therefore be greatly appreciated if more action could be taken by wealthy nations as well as multilateral organizations to restructure or grant moratoria for the debt repayments of poorer countries struggling in the wake of the pandemic. This kind of support would greatly help those countries in their time of need, and more broadly, assist a speedier global recovery. I hope that such support will be forthcoming in the future. As the pandemic has shown, adverse situations in one country can quickly have ramifications on the wider region and eventually on the globe itself. That is why the countries across the region and the world at large must work together to solve problems that affect nations, whether in terms of epidemics, economy, or ecology. In this context, the ongoing climate crisis is perhaps the most difficult challenge that humanity needs to overcome. As the recent United Nations Climate Conference has shown, achieving truly global consensus on this critical issue is difficult. Nevertheless, global action on limiting deforestation, curbing use of fossil fuels, preventing overexploitation of finite resources, and increasing use of renewable energy is essential. As a developing island nation that is very vulnerable to climate change, Sri Lanka is deeply aware of these dangers. Adverse weather patterns caused by climate change have already affected the country on several occasions in the past decade. There is every likelihood that the impact of these phenomena will worsen in time to come. We must act now before it is too late. Sri Lanka has been active on the global stage in response to the ongoing climate crisis. In 2019, the Colombo Declaration on Sustainable Nitrogen Management was formulated to support the target of halving harmful nitrogen waste globally by 2030. Sri Lanka is a co-lead of the Energy Compact for No New Coal Power and leads the action group on mangrove restoration in the Commonwealth Blue Charter initiative. At the national level, my government has pledged to increase the contribution of renewable energy sources to our power requirements to 70% by 2030. We have prioritized enhancing national forest cover, and we hope to strengthen our carbon sequestration capacity by 7% between now and 2030. Sri Lanka also aims to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. The use of artificial fertilizer is strongly discouraged, and our policy is to support the rapid development of organic agriculture within the country in future. A range of policy actions is also required on ecological issues that are related to but distinct from climate change. Earlier this year, the container ship Express Pearl caught fire off the coast of Colombo, Sri Lanka. Despite concerted efforts by the Sri Lanka Navy, Air Force, and Coast Guards, together with Indian Navy and Coast Guard vessels, the fire continued for several days, and the ship ultimately sank off Sri Lanka waters. Enormous environmental damage was caused by this incident. Hazardous chemicals, including nitric acid and other toxic substances, as well as several tons of oil and plastic resins pellets from spilled cargo, were released into the ocean. The resulting pollution prevented fishing and adversely affected the livelihoods of thousands in our seaboard communities for months, and many continue to pose significant danger to marine life in the long term. The Express Pearl disaster was not an isolated incident. Less than a year before it occurred, another significant maritime disaster was only narrowly averted. The fire on board MT New Diamond, which was transporting a large quantity of crude oil near our waters, was successfully doused through concerted efforts by the Sri Lanka Navy and Air Force, with support from India as well as 2 Russian naval vessels in the region at the time. Both these incidents point towards the urgent need for strict controls surrounding the oceanic transport of hazardous and environmentally sensitive materials. Similar controls also need to be imposed on overfishing and ecologically damaging practices, including bottom trawling, long line fishing, and blast fishing in the Indian Ocean region. These practices severely deplete fish stocks, result in wasteful bycatch of marine species, and cause devastation to other organisms that are critical to sustaining maritime ecosystems. Extraterritorial fishing by well-equipped trawlers is another significant problem in the region that affects the livelihoods of poor communities that rely on local fishing for their sustenance. Coordinated action to mitigate such issues will be critical in sustaining the overall ecology and the viability of local economies in the Indian Ocean region in the future. I therefore propose the establishment of a regional mechanism to coordinate such issues relating to sustainability. Another critical area of focus for countries in the Indian Ocean region and our global partners is security. A considerable proportion of the world's trade in commodities and manufactured goods takes place through the Indian Ocean region. Maintaining the integrity of its sea lines of communication is therefore of utmost importance to the global economy. In this context, however, it must be admitted that the Indian Ocean region is also the location of considerable criminal activity, including human smuggling, drug smuggling, and terrorism. These are all major issues that need to be addressed. Narcotics trafficking remains a significant problem for countries in this region. Sri Lanka has spent considerable effort over the past several years on intercepting shipments of narcotics, including heroin, ice, and cannabis by criminal networks that operate in its waters. These are truly transnational networks whose different aspects are overseen by criminal operatives from various nations. Often, the leaders of a particular drug network are based in one nation, while the drugs they traffic in are produced in a different country and transported by persons of various nationalities to yet other countries around the region. Due to the complex transnational nature of these networks, they can only effectively be dismantled through coordinated efforts between the intelligence services, coast guards, and navies of regional countries. Further, improving intelligence sharing and cooperation within the region is therefore critically important to curbing these threats. Similar coordination and cooperation will be required to contain human trafficking, which has become a lucrative business for criminal operatives in this region. Sri Lanka has been used in past years both as source and as a transit point for illegal migration to Oceania. However, this activity has by now been largely curbed through close cooperation between the Sri Lankan and Australian governments. This is a very good example of what can be achieved through greater coordination between countries. As we go forward, such coordination will also be required to counter the threat posed by religious extremism and terrorism in countries in the region. As Sri Lanka's experience with the devastating Easter Sunday attacks of 2019 has shown, this problem too is not one that can be contained to any specific locality. Extremist and terrorist ideology can spread with ease from nation to nation unless carefully monitored and suppressed. The only way to do this is through intelligence sharing and other forms of intergovernmental action, which I strongly advocate for. I'm confident that with greater international cooperation, countries in our region will be able to better withstand all the challenges that they face in terms of ecology, economy, and epidemics. I trust that over the forthcoming sessions, participants will have fruitful dialogue on these issues. I hope that they will be able to arrive at a broader understanding on what we as nations in the region can do collectively towards resolving our common issues. I assure you that Sri Lanka will fully cooperate in any regional mechanisms proposed to meaningfully accomplish this. I have utmost confidence that no matter how challenging these issues may be, we can overcome them successfully if we approach them together in a spirit of true cooperation and goodwill. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, the President of Sri Lanka. We will now have a special address by the Prime Minister of Fiji, Voreqe Bainimarama, and he will be joining us through video telecast.
Your Excellency, President Rajapaksa, members of the India Foundation, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Bula Vinaka from Fiji. Every day, India's star rises in politics, economics and trade, technology and science. It is a leader, and like all good leaders, it shows concern for its neighbor and its neighborhood. And I greatly appreciate the India Foundation's focus on the future and on research to develop the knowledge, policies and systems we will need to build a better future, not only for India, but for the region. The themes you have chosen for this meeting focus on the greatest challenges of our time: ecology, economy, and epidemic. We are all currently in a predicament that forces us to deal with all three at one time. The three are intricately woven together, and we must approach them holistically as one problem. But we also must understand that sometimes opportunities arrive at our door disguised as problems. The challenge for policymakers and experts is to unmask those opportunities and seize them and turn them into advantages. It was not long ago that epidemic was not a major part of our discussion. In Fiji, we were concerned, first and foremost, with engineering sustainable economic growth in the face of climate change. We determined to build a green and blue economy, and we have set our priorities and passed laws and wrote regulations to put our economy on a steep, sustainable trajectory. We enacted legislation that prioritizes climate adaptation and mitigation. The impact of climate change is now a priority consideration in every government activity, and we continued that commitment even while our economy was set on its heels by the COVID pandemic. So economy and ecology were working together, or at least we were determined that they would work together. But now, due to the pandemic, we find that we must build an economy that has suffered huge losses. Businesses have suffered. People have lost jobs and income. Government has lost revenue, even while taking extraordinary measures to support our people's income. So, while we were busy building a new blue and green economy, we must now rebuild the economy we've had. And that is where we have opportunity, because we will not go back to the economy of 2019. We are redoubling our efforts in sustainability. Many of our businesses, especially in the vital tourism sector, used this period when our tourism industry was virtually shut down to invest in sustainability, in new construction, and new infrastructure that is stronger and greener. We have no choice but to adapt, and that includes adapting to this virus, which seems to keep taunting us with new variants whenever we think we have it under control. As you probably know, Fiji just reopened officially to international tourism. Some countries made the decision to close their borders again. We did not. Our greatest defense against this virus in Fiji is the fact that 90% of our adult population is vaccinated, and we continue to vaccinate. Obviously, there's much we do not know yet about the Omicron variant, but the vaccinations have been effective so far, and there is no evidence that they will not continue to be. I am in full agreement with President Biden, who said that this variant was a cause for concern, not panic. Tomorrow, we may be introduced to yet another letter of the Greek alphabet, a pi variant or a sigma variant. Do we shut down? Do you remember the mu variant, which was a cause for some concern a few months ago? It is still being monitored by the WHO, but no one talks about it. Now, we will watch carefully and we will implement our contingency plan if we have to. And we will take strong action if it is necessary. But all of us will have to learn how to manage the risk of this virus, because COVID is not going away soon. The answer can't be lockdowns. Lockdowns were always a temporary solution. They cannot be a long-term strategy. Clearly, the final threads in this interwoven predicament that I mentioned earlier are COVID. Simply put, we must recover. But our recovery must not take us back to where we were. We need to be greener. We need to be bluer. We need to be more resilient. We need to grow faster. And we may have to do all of this while maintaining constant vigilance against a virus. These are challenges we all must confront together and in solidarity. Fiji pressed at COP26 in Glasgow for a greater commitment to climate finance on the part of developed economies. If developing countries are going to adapt their infrastructure and their economies to the ravages of climate change, we need financing mechanisms that will disburse funds quickly and allow flexibility. The old development finance models won't work because time is precious and the scale of the task is huge. We need more grants and concessional loans, and that includes debt incurred by governments for COVID relief. We finally achieved an agreement for 100 billion US by 2030, which is far less than the 750 billion that will eventually be required. But it is a start, and we will keep pressing because it is absolutely necessary. If we are going to confront these problems and unmask the opportunities, we must cooperate across the regions. Conferences like this and research organizations like the India Foundation can make a big difference in forging that cooperation. And Fiji is prepared to do its part to finding and implement solutions that will bring security and prosperity to our countries and people. At COP26, Fiji signed an agreement with the Australian government under its new initiative, the Indo-Pacific Carbon Offset Scheme, under which Australia is making more than 100 million Australian dollars available to developing countries in the region for bilateral carbon offsets. This is just one initiative by one major economy, but it is an example of what can be done with political will and creative thinking. More must be done. As you know, Fiji has criticized many nations in the past for foot dragging on climate commitments, especially where coal is concerned. Ending our addiction to coal is the single most urgent and obvious step that all nations must take to head off the worst of climate change. Ladies and gentlemen, this is of course the Indian Ocean Conference, and we are here to discuss more than Indian Ocean as a body of water and ecosystem. We are here to discuss ways to improve the quality of life in our region in all ways. It is a big undertaking, but I cannot leave you without talking about the ocean because it is Fiji's lifeblood. And we cannot adequately address those three E's, ecology, economy, and epidemic, without the ocean. Fiji is a large ocean state. The ocean sustains and protects us. That is why we have pressed since our COP23 presidency in 2017 for it to be an integral part of climate change negotiations. At COP26, Fiji announced the launch of our Blue Bond in 2022 to accelerate our economy's net zero transition and help finance projects to adapt and build resilience to the effects of climate change. Fiji is further committed to designating 30% of our exclusive economic zone as a marine protected area by 2030 and protecting our maritime boundaries against the threat of sea level rise. That is where we see our future. Our ocean is our greatest asset, and it must be healthy If we are to meet those challenges and seize the opportunities they bring, we may all have our own specific set of circumstances. We are of different sizes. We stand at different levels of development. We have different geographies, and we have different prospects, priorities, and challenges for economic recovery. But it's clear we stand our best chance at a truly transformative and sustainable recovery by working together. Through sound economic policies and strategies, through coordinated trade routes, improved access to healthcare and education, job creation, and investment in green, renewable, and digital infrastructure, we can achieve our ultimate goal of building inclusive economies while ensuring sustainability and macroeconomic stability. Thank you.
May I now request for an address by His Excellency Faisal Naseem, Vice President of Maldives.
Chair of the Organizing Committee of the 5th Indian Ocean Conference, His Excellency Gotabaya Rajapaksa, President of the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka, distinguished foreign ministers and heads of delegations, distinguished representatives of the India Foundation, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening to you all. I would like to start by thanking the government of the United Arab Emirates for their generous hospitality extended to me and my delegation. Let me take this opportunity to congratulate the government and the people of UAE on the 50th anniversary of the founding of the nations marked on Thursday. I would also like to thank the India Foundation for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to share the views of the government of Maldives under the theme Indian Ocean Ecology, Economy, and Epidemic, a befitting theme that reflects the most pressing needs of the day to protect our planet, and one which has a special significance for the Maldives. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, today we are facing unprecedented global challenges. The COVID-19 pandemic has devastated our economies in ways we have never imagined. It has also radically changed the nature of our social interactions. The COVID-19 pandemic has tested the Maldives. It severely contracted our economy and reversed years of hard-won gains. Tourism, the biggest contributor to our GDP, took the hardest hit as countries closed their borders and airplanes sat on the tarmac. We had to go into multiple lockdowns as we faced surges in COVID-19 numbers. Our restaurants, cafes, and small businesses were empty. We also had to make the difficult decision of closing our schools in order to protect our children and their teachers, interrupting the education. Today, the situation is different in the Maldives. Tourists have started working on our white sandy beaches, swimming in our splendidly blue lagoons, and have started filling up our resorts. Our restaurants are serving customers again. We are back in business and our economy is recovering. Our schools have reopened too, and the laughter of our children can be heard again in the classrooms. We were able to do this because of well-planned health regulations from the government and because of our robust vaccination campaign. In the Maldives, 95% of our frontline tourist workers are fully vaccinated to ensure the safety of our guests. Based on the principle of equality, all residents of the Maldives are eligible to receive vaccines regardless of their social status. We believe that equitable access to vaccines is vital to stop the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic also laid bare the stark reality of multidimensional poverty. As a deadline to meet the goals of Agenda 30 draws closer, we need to ramp up our efforts to bridge the gap between the rich and the poor within and among nations. Regional trade must be promoted. Mutually beneficial foreign direct investments must be further incentivized. And we must support each other to strengthen our governance systems. The Maldives has a lot of economic potentials yet to be unlocked. Our doors are open to all, and we welcome all the investment opportunities. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the pledges made at COP26 were progressive. But the question we should be asking is, are we doing enough to save the Maldives and other small island states in time? The imminent risk that scientists have warned us for many years have caught up with us. Yet the conference failed to reach consensus on a plan to sufficiently reduce carbon emission to limit global heating to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Let me be clear, the world only has 97 months on our hands to scale up our ambitions to maintain the temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. The survival of my home and that of other small island states depend on this. Even though we contribute little to heat-trapping emissions, we face the brunt of the devastating consequences of climate change. This is simply unjust. We cannot remain idle. It is high time that we take actions. We must shift away from fossil fuels, invest in green technology, and protect the marine environment. To do that, we need increased access to adaptation finance. We must recognize the merits of investing in adaptation to reduce long-term costs of loss due to climate change. We must also invest in further enhancing our knowledge and awareness of the impact of the climate crisis so that we can take necessary actions to counter its adverse effects. The Maldives is doing its part. We have committed to achieving net zero by 2020. We are putting our efforts towards better waste management and greener source of energy. We are also developing a blue economy that protects our vulnerable oceans, lagoons, and mangroves. We are taking actions. We need all of you and the rest of the world to take actions too. Our shared future depends on it. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, The Indian Ocean is an important trading hub, which is directly connected to our economic well-being. It is for that reason that President Ibrahim Solih has prioritized Indian Ocean security as the most important item on his foreign policy agenda. Addressing the ever-growing threats of trans-border terrorism, piracy, narco-trafficking, as well as non-traditional security threats such as climate change, cybersecurity, and human trafficking requires the support and cooperation of all regional and international partners. No one country can safeguard the resilience and security of the Indian Ocean region alone. We must continue to pool in our resources and strengthen our regional partnerships. As Indian Ocean littoral countries, we must preserve and utilize its wealth sustainably and wisely. In the Maldives, we practice one of the most sustainable forms of fishing, our traditional method of fishing using pole and line. I urge all the countries to follow their own sustainable fishing methods to guarantee healthy fish stocks in our shared oceans. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we have an enormous task ahead of us to respond to the climate crisis and its consequences, to rebuild our economies, ensure security of the Indian Ocean, and most importantly, to contain the COVID-19 pandemic. The success of our efforts depends on our willingness to cooperate and our solidarity to help each other. We must assume greater leadership in increasing our engagements and unifying our collective efforts to ensure a healthy and prosperous future for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. May I now have the pleasure of inviting His Excellency Sayyid Badr Al Busaidi, Foreign Minister of Oman, to give us his address.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, dear friends and colleagues, I'm delighted truly to be with you at this 5th Indian Ocean Conference. I'd like to extend my grateful thanks to the India Foundation for inviting me to speak, and to the government and people of our brotherly country, the United Arab Emirates, for their generous and immaculate hospitality. And may I take the opportunity to once again express my warmest congratulations on the Golden Jubilee of the United Arab Emirates. So happy National Day again. Ladies and gentlemen, I offer my sincere thanks to His Excellency President Gotabaya Rajapaksa for graciously taking the chair. He guides a productive discussion that can act as a platform for effective multilateral action across the Indian Ocean. The Sultanate of Oman has an extensive coastline on the Indian Ocean and a long tradition of trade and interaction with the people and countries that surround it, which goes back far beyond the bounds of recorded history. Our national identity reflects this. Our people are diverse. They have connections in India, in Iran, East Africa, and Southeast Asia. This history of engagement with a wide range of cultures has contributed greatly to the character of Omanis and their hospitable and open-minded nature. Respect for all cultures, races, and religions is deeply ingrained, and this has made an important contribution to harmonious coexistence at home. Our culture, cuisine, art, and language all reflect the interaction caused by centuries of connectivities with our Indian Ocean neighbors, which is why the themes of this conference, ecology, economy, and epidemic, touch us really deeply. And I would like to say a little on each topic in turn. The beauty and the biodiversity of the ocean is extraordinary. We need to take steps today to conserve this for our future generations and, crucially, reverse the damage already done through overfishing and pollution, as well as preserving any further rise in sea levels. The magnificent turtles, the beautiful dolphins, and glowing corals that populate our seas, just to name a few, are all dear to our hearts and a source of boundless joy. Exploitation of the ocean is nothing new. Our ancestors have done it for millennia. And now, for most of us, probably all of us, the blue economy is a vital part of our long-term development plans. There is an urgent need to think deeply about the implications of this. The very concept of a blue economy is totally reliant upon the principle of sustainability. Without better stewardship of the ocean resources, there will be no blue economy for our grandchildren and future generations. The well-being of the marine environment, the threat of climate change, and the future prosperity of the people of the Indian Ocean are all deeply interconnected and interlinked. Climate change is already having a detrimental effect through the increased frequency of what used to be viewed as freak weather conditions. Several major cyclones that have hit Oman in the last 15 years, all of which have inflicted significant damage. I know that Oman is not the only country represented here today which has already suffered the consequences of climate change. Increasing scientific evidence affirms the need for urgent action, and the recent COP26 meeting has helped us focus minds on these issues. But the solutions are unlikely to be simple or straightforward, and we recognize that. And finding them will certainly require a well-coordinated, proactive, and above all, multilateral response. For Oman, the biggest component in the response to climate change is diversification of the economy. And the Indian Ocean, as a secure environment for free trade, will facilitate innovation, maximize economic development, and maximize diversification. Our special economic zone and port at Duqm, alongside the existing ports of Sohar in the north and Salalah in the south, are all part of this future. Salalah is already the 10th biggest port in the world in terms of volume. For this ambition to be realized, the seas must be secure. Multilateralism is the only effective way to achieve this. How many national navies have a truly global capability? I think we can count them on the fingers of one hand. So maritime security depends on multilateralism, and multilateralism depends upon the rule of law. Just 15 years ago, piracy was a significant problem. But within a few years, transnational cooperation reduced the impact. The establishment of a maritime security patrol area in which a coalition of navies worked to secure the seas did the job by a large extent. But I wish to share my increasing concern about the potential escalation of regional tensions in the Indian Ocean. Piracy may have receded, and now politically motivated hijacking is the new phenomenon. Recently, these have come into the context of Iran and its relations with the region and wider world. And let us be clear, more often than not, the narrative you find in the media is heavily spun this way and that. It could not be clearer that the way to minimize these incidents is not to exclude from international dialogue those with whom there may be disagreement or indeed misunderstanding. Isolation only serves to limit the capacity of the international community to tackle the issues we face, not only as the countries of the Indian Ocean, but also as a planet. All parties must be welcomed in the international arena on the basis of transparent communication. This will give us all a fuller knowledge of what goes on in our seas, and so guarantee a safer and more secure environment for all. Currently, we all face another similar challenge: how to rebuild our economies in the teeth of the COVID-19 pandemic. As we tackle this, surely our environment and our oceans must be taken into consideration as a matter of priority. As countries around the world began to experience epidemics and lockdowns in 2020, one silver lining shone through again and again. The collapse of economic activity brought with it a sharp fall in greenhouse gas emissions. The air became clearer and cleaner, and wildlife began to thrive. But these gains will not last of their own accord. Our task today is to put into place the mechanisms necessary to ensure that it does. our investments in green energy need to be of the order of trillions, not billions. Sustainability must remain at the top of the agenda, and the rule of maritime law and strong multilateral collaboration must build a brighter future for all generations to come. The pandemic has also highlighted to everyone the importance of unity in the face of a common threat. We share far more than we differ. And where differences exist, the pathway to harmony comes through inclusivity, mutual understanding, and mutual respect. I am deeply grateful to have the opportunity to share these thoughts with you. My thanks again to our hosts, to the chair, and to all the organizers of this great event. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. May I now request Shri Jaishankar, External Affairs Minister of India, Vice Chair of the Organizing Committee, IOC 2021, to give us the keynote address for today's session.
Distinguished dignitaries on the dais, organizers of the conference, dear participants, a very good evening to all of you. I'm very pleased to join you today at the opening of the 5th Indian Ocean Conference. We are meeting after a bit of a gap due to the COVID. And in that period, a number of developments have taken place that have a direct bearing on the well-being of the Indian Ocean region. So it would be best to do a big picture stock taking, perhaps at the beginning of the conference itself. A starting point could be the trend lines that have influenced the evolution of the Indian Ocean in recent years. First and foremost is the changing American strategic posture. Since 2008, we have witnessed a greater caution in US power projection and an effort to correct its overextension. It may have taken different forms and be articulated in very different ways. But there is a larger consistency over 3 administrations that they themselves may not readily recognize. It is expressed in footprint and posture, terms of engagement, extent of involvement, and nature of initiatives. Overall, the United States is moving towards greater realism, both about itself and the world. It is adjusting to multipolarity and rebalancing, and re-examining the balance between its domestic revival and commitments abroad. This makes it a more active partner beyond orthodox constructs. Given how strong its influence is on the Indian Ocean, this cannot but have implications. We must also bear in mind the uniqueness of the US polity and its ability to reinvent itself. The second major trend is the rise of China. Even otherwise, the emergence of a power at a global level is an extraordinary happening. That this is a different kind of polity enhances the sense of change. The USSR may have borne some similarities, but it never had the centrality to the global economy that China has today. The consequences of China's growing capabilities are particularly profound because of the extrapolation of its domestic seamlessness to the world outside. As a result, whether it is connectivity, technology, or trade, there is now an ongoing debate on the changed nature of power and influence. Separately, we have also seen a sharpening of tensions on territorial issues across the breadth of Asia. Agreements and understandings of yesteryears now seem to have some question marks. Time will, of course, provide answers. Cumulatively, all these factors underline the importance of establishing a multipolar Asia as a foundation of a multipolar world. It would obviously be a serious error to visualize the two developments that I have mentioned as a zero-sum game. Sweeping generalizations are mind games, not serious analysis. Both trends are still open-ended, and gaps created by one cannot be readily filled by the other. As a result, what is emerging is a greater role for middle powers, as well as a stronger practice of regionalism. Whether it is the Indo-Pacific, Afghanistan, or the Gulf, we are seeing more players, greater localization, and arrangements of pragmatism. In fact, we are now entering a world of greater plurilateralism, one that recognizes the shortcomings of multilateralism, the limits of bilateralism, and the untenability of unilateralism from whichever quarter. For the Indian Ocean region, this means more activities and stronger cooperation among resident players. It will lead to new equations and more contemporary understandings, not just among themselves, but also perhaps with external interests. The very centrality of the ocean to global economic processes will ensure responsiveness to the ongoing changes. Given the combination of fatigue and risk aversion that is now so pronounced, it also means a greater proclivity to find regional answers. Put succinctly, Indian Ocean nations are called upon today to take greater responsibilities, fashion better relationships, and display more initiative. Two developments have significantly heightened uncertainties that Indian Ocean countries contemplate. One is the American withdrawal from Afghanistan. It leaves both the immediate and extended region grappling with serious concerns about terrorism, radicalism, instability, narco trafficking, and governance practices. Given proximity and sociology, we are all affected one way or the other. The second is the impact of COVID on a region that is particularly vulnerable to health and economic stresses. The pandemic has not just been a once-in-a-century shock to the international system. It has also thoroughly exposed all its fault lines and shortcomings. In economic terms, the dangers of over-centralized globalization are starkly apparent. The answer lies in both more reliable and resilient supply chains, as well as in greater trust and transparency. In political terms, the absence of vaccine equity and the reluctance to cooperatively address a challenge of such magnitude spoke for itself. International organizations failed the world, whether in terms of establishing the origins of the problem or in leading the response to it. What we have seen instead are specific countries stepping forward in different ways to mitigate the crisis, some individually, others in partnership. India has done its fair share. It has been expressed in the supply of medicines, vaccines, and oxygen, or in a willingness to take care of expatriate populations in times of difficulty. As we move from a just-in-time globalization to a just-in-case one, the Indian Ocean will witness shorter and multiple supply chains and a broader definition of what constitutes national security. These could well shape the nature of the recovery process. We also need to expeditiously normalize travel through certification recognition so that livelihoods are restored ASAP. India has worked out solutions with about 100 nations in that regard. On the other hand, there have also been consequential developments that have opened up new opportunities. The Abraham Accords are notable in that regard. They allow us to look at connectivity, logistics, trade, and economic cooperation in a more ambitious way. In fact, the demonstration of political will to overcome historical divides has enormous cooperative consequences. I draw your attention to the emerging initiative between India, UAE, Israel, and the United States in that regard. Those familiar with the history of the Indian Ocean region would also recognize the damage from the colonial period of artificial divides established by external interests. More than any other country, India has been a victim of this phenomenon. That we have started to approach the Gulf, ASEAN, and Central Asia as extended neighborhoods is indicative of a changed thinking. So, of course, was Sagar, the oceans policy. All these bode well in terms of exploring more collaborative endeavors in the coming times. We need that not just for the longer term rebuilding of the Indian Ocean community, but also to address pressing challenges emanating from post-COVID economic recovery. A world of more decentralized globalization obviously offers greater opportunities to many more nations. These could be accentuated by a stronger desire to foster localization and promote regionalism. It is important that we do not perpetuate or even repeat some of the mistakes of the pre-COVID era. Assuming unsustainable levels of debt in pursuit of apparently attractive projects was one concern. The economic downturn that accompanied the pandemic has heightened this significantly. The ongoing debate on responsible and viable connectivity is another. When plans and projects lack transparency, market viability, consultation, or local participation, their consequences are unlikely to be beneficial. This too has been sharpened at a time of financial stress. Like the rest of the world, nations of the Indian Ocean are also grappling with the same global concerns. Worries about terrorism have got stronger in the light of recent developments in the AFPAC region. The international community has voiced those sentiments in UN Security Council Resolution 2593 by demanding assurances that Afghan soil will not be used for terrorism, by pressing for inclusive governance and seeking safeguards on treatment of minorities, women, and children. On the existential issue of climate change, countries of the Indian Ocean have the highest stakes. There is widespread disappointment about the lack of adequate progress on climate finance. Developing countries cannot consent to the developed shifting responsibilities onto them because they do not wish to change their lifestyle. The pandemic too has added further to our burdens, in part due to a similar mindset. We are seeing a glaring vaccine divide whose implications were so obvious. Yet, when they happen, we all appear to be surprised. The needs of the global south have become much stronger in the last 2 years. The real damage of the COVID, apart from its direct health and livelihood consequences, is how much it has set back sustainable development goals. Yet, it is against my nature to paint a dismal picture. I do believe that difficult times require stronger international cooperation. The Quad is a good example at one extremity of the Indian Ocean. Within the space of a year, it has developed a robust agenda covering maritime security, cybersecurity, climate action, vaccine collaboration, critical and emerging technologies, higher education, resilient supply chains, disinformation, multilateral organizations, semiconductors, counterterrorism, humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, as well as infrastructure development. The old adage that where there is a will, there is a way clearly has much to it. Another promising endeavor is the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative that is being undertaken in the framework of the East Asia Summit at the initiative of India. It is a good illustration of the practical challenges that we, the nations of the Indian Ocean, face in terms of nurturing, securing, and utilizing the maritime domain. The era when others could be relied upon to take care of the global commons is now over. We all have to step forward to contribute as a collective responsibility. Already, Australia has agreed to lead on the maritime ecology pillar, Japan on the connectivity and transport one, and France and Indonesia on the marine resources pillar. We are hopeful that in the coming years, this group effort will gather greater traction. Any serious discussion of a domain naturally involves an assessment of the rules that apply. In the case of the maritime one, UNCLOS 1982 is regarded very much as the constitution for the seas. Especially in a globalized world, it is vital that freedom of navigation and overflight and unimpeded commerce are respected and facilitated. It is also essential that disputes, if any, are resolved through peaceful means without threat or use of force, and the exercise of self-restraint in the conduct of activities. As a state party to UNCLOS itself, India has always urged all parties to show utmost respect for the convention, including recognizing the authority of its tribunal and its awards. Only then can we be assured that the sea lanes of communication remain conducive to peace, stability, prosperity, and development. The Indian Ocean Conference brings together a large group of nations whose predominant identity is often more sub-regional. The exchange of views and the accompanying socialization contributes to the rebuilding of a geography that has long had an organic unity. Today, as we seek to recover from the COVID pandemic, as we assess the implications of the Afghanistan situation, and as we come to terms with rebalancing multipolarity and major power competition, it is only natural that we will look more amongst ourselves for solutions. I'm confident that this conference will be a productive forum in that regard. It is for that reason that the Government of India and the Ministry of External Affairs attach so much value to it and extend their strongest support. I thank you once again for having me over, and I wish you a very, very productive deliberation.
Ladies and gentlemen, in the traditions of India, as we often do in the India Foundation events, we would like to have a small felicitation ceremony for all their excellencies. May I now request Mr. Pranav Vora, CEO of Adani Shipping, to come to the stage and felicitate. Board of Governors, India Foundation, to please come on stage and play felicitations to His Excellency Faisal Naseem, Vice President of Maldives. Jaishankar, Chairman, Global School Foundation, to please come on stage and felicitate His Excellency Ahmed Ali Al Saya, Minister of State, UAE, United Arab Emirates. Board of Governors India Foundation, to please come on stage and felicitate His Please come on stage and felicitate His Excellency as Chairman. On behalf of the India Foundation and its board, I would like to thank all dignitaries who joined us in person and virtually today. I would also like to thank our partners, the ECSSR in Abu Dhabi, the RSIS in Singapore, INSSL in Sri Lanka, who are partners and have helped us organize this conference. My greatest thanks to the government of UAE, especially the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, for their support making this conference. And I have to mention here Mr. Mohammad Al-Zurani from the ministry, particularly for his team that have worked tirelessly, even through the holidays, to make this conference possible. Thank you very much. Of course, our sponsors, Adani, Greenco, Reliance Industries, ONGC Videsh, Transworld, Amaraja, Global School Foundation, and all others. All our friends from the media, all the participants, and finally the Conrad Hotel for this beautiful venue and their hospitality. Thank you very much to all of you.
Indian Ocean Conference, which centers around the issues of ecology, the economy, and the epidemic. Arguably, the most large-scale challenge of our times is climate change, and it is a challenge that will impact generations at every corner of the world. We have reached a precipice. a moment of choosing, and it will take commitment by all of us as we move forward with synergistic solutions at the local, state, and global levels to create a carbon-neutral world. Each one of these three pillars of today's conference, ecology, economy, and epidemic, will need solutions, real solutions, if we are to meet the challenge. As to ecology, you will discuss ensuring sustainable use of marine resources, the effect of climate change on littoral and island nations, mitigating the effects of natural disasters, green energy solutions for a sustainable future, protecting the marine environment, and reducing the impact of marine pollution in the Indian Ocean region. Concerning the economy, it's important to understand the possibilities for economic recovery and growth in the emerging markets and developing countries of the Indian Ocean region post-COVID-19, and the critical importance of trade routes in the Indian Ocean, the importance of renewables as the new currency for the Indian Ocean, for energy security, and for fostering great economic cooperation in the region. And finally, it is important to discuss the impact of COVID-19 on the countries of the region, the global fault lines and vulnerabilities of healthcare systems, socioeconomic fallout, regional cooperation and future challenges, cooperation in public health, and the tools of diplomacy, espousing innovation in healthcare management, and other important elements of a solution. Thank you to the India Foundation for hosting this important summit every year, and thank you to the U.S.-India Strategic Partnership Forum for its commitment to strengthening the U.S.-India partnership in Washington, D.C. and in New Delhi and across both of our countries. Your dedication helps facilitate partnerships between our two countries that create meaningful opportunities in the lives of citizens.
For special plenary tomorrow. Have a good evening and please enjoy the dinner.